So, how have you been?
Yeah, good, thank you. I think, this last year and a half has been a challenge for anyone and everyone in many different ways, hasn't it? But they're all back at school. Things feel a little bit easier. I've got some of my own time back, although I'm killing myself in the garden at the moment. So, that's fun. But it feels like back to normal, but whatever normal is, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. So, personally, though, how has the past year been for you?
It's been interesting. I think I've worked from home for a long period of time already. So my adjustment to the new way of working has been relatively easy for me. We moved out of London a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now. And as part of that deal, I was allowed to work from home, which meant the adjustment over the last year has been not that seismic compared to a lot of people, but the big challenge has obviously just been keeping kids entertained. And with four of them, ranging in ages from, like, I've got the twins who are 5, and then my eldest who's 14 turning 17. Like, she's just testing me so hard at the moment. It's been a challenge just to, like, find those quiet moments for yourself as well. And I found that actually I threw myself back into cycling. I rediscovered it, and I used to cycle a lot when I was younger, and then obviously family life gets in the way and different priorities and all that kind of stuff. So you start to lose those things that you used to do. And if anything, I use this as an opportunity to rediscover some of those things, which has been great. So yeah, it's been a bit of a challenge from not seeing people perspective, but I've also had an opportunity to kind of focus on what I want from life a bit more, which has been quite nice.
Focus on yourself, and that's what's really, really important.
Yeah.
Now, 4 girls. I should start off by saying I've got 3.
Oh, congratulations! Well done.
So we are we do have a wee bit in common here. But I was just reading there, 4 twins. Your last children, twins. You know, you're asking for trouble there, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, I think we probably did what you got away with, which was go for the third, and then because I'm one of 3 and Clemmie's one of 3, and I've always liked the dynamics of how 3 works. I don't know why, I just do. So I thought 3 was a good number, and of course we got the buy one get one free offer that you didn't necessarily ask for, and I was pretty shell shocked when we got the news that twins were coming along. And the question is, do you have twins running in your family? And my wife turned to me and said, yeah, I've got twins running in my family. I was like, well, why the hell didn't you tell me before? We didn't think this through. But yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a shock. But obviously, after you get over the initial news, you're just happy that you've got children. It doesn't matter what number there are in the end, really, because they all make noise. They all require your attention. And if anything, I've found with twins, it's been the opposite. They can self-contain. They play with each other all the time. It's like having a permanent sleepover with their best mate, which is a bit of a nightmare sometimes. But it's good. I've learned a lot about girls in a short period of time. What feels like a short period of time.
Now your eldest is 14. My eldest is 10, going on 11.
Oh, okay.
So what have I got to look forward to?
Well, I don't want to say every child is the same, but I think when I was growing up, people said, "Oh yeah, girls always mature a lot more quicker than boys," and I think I found that to be true. I mean, in my heart of hearts, I still think I'm 15. I haven't really grown up, even though my exterior shell looks like I'm 38 or a lot older. Whereas I think the level of maturity of girls is a lot more rapid, and they're a lot more adult, a lot more quickly. And this is going to sound like I'm such an old person, but children seem to be growing up quicker as well these days. And I don't know if that's exposure to social media or any number of different things, but childhood, that window of childhood to be a child seems to be dwindling. And my 13, 14-year-old is desperate to be independent and be out in the world and doing all these things that she sees on Instagram and YouTube and TikTok and all this kind of stuff. And I'm kind of wishing that, she would just enjoy the time that she's got right now to have like no responsibility or very limited responsibility, and to be a bit more of a child. And maybe that's wishful thinking on my part, but yeah, that's what my experience would tell to you, is that you're going to lose that child quite quickly to young adulthood, and that's where the number of arguments that you have increases. I think also because they have such a good use of the internet, they probably know more than you about a lot of subjects as well, which is really disconcerting, because when I was growing up, my parents were always the fountain of knowledge, right? You go to them, you ask a question, they either blag it or they know the answer. And I'm finding that I'm finding out the same stuff as her at the same time, or at least I'm being taught stuff by her now. So that's an interesting experience, that's for sure.
So 14, I'll be honest with you, I'm dreading it, because as I say, my house is full of women. I've got my wife, I've got the 3 kids, and up until last year, even just the dog was a female as well. We eventually got another male in the house by getting a male puppy, a male Dalmatian. That was the bargaining chip. Was okay, if I'm not having a boy, I'm getting a puppy.
Yeah, I had the same deal as you. I got a dog called Pablo, and then during lockdown or the end of last year, the girls were like, "Oh yeah, we should get another one." And of course, that one's female, so it's now 7 females versus us 2 boys. But yeah, it's fine.
So tell me about the book, because I was looking at this and I'm 1,000,000% going to get it, because it'll probably be like reading my own story. Yeah. Forever Outnumbered, where did it come from? Like, what made you decide, let's get a book out here?
Well, I think the same reason why I started Instagram originally, which was there was a lot of sugarcoating around what parenting looked like, and almost like this weird competitive parenting, which you see at the school gates and is like portrayed in lots of programs right now on TV, like Motherland, for example. But the onus on social media at that point was very much around mums talking about being a mother, and there was no representation, or very limited representation, of fathers, and even less about fathers of girls. And I had very little. Well, by that point, my eldest was probably 7 or 8, and there wasn't very much else that I could latch onto from experience. And you always worry as a parent: am I messing things up? What is there anyone else that's gone through this experience? Like, what can I learn from other people? And so I wanted to provide a bit more of a reality around what family life is really like, rather than nice pictures of people walking down the beach holding hands. It doesn't work like that, you know. Everyone's arguing all the time. So that's why I started the Instagram piece. And then from that, the book just came, because I felt like I had the opportunity to talk about what family life was really like right from the outset of having young ones, relatively young in life. So I was 25 when we had Anya, and right up until the point where we are now. And I think there's probably another one that I could probably write about fathering teenage daughters, which is a completely different kettle of fish altogether. So we'll have to see if I've got enough energy to write another one.
What is the dynamic at home like? Is both you guys, is it Clemmy? Is that how you pronounce?
Yes.
Both you guys are very active and very in the public eye. What's the dynamic like at home in that sense?
Well, I think there's this perception that if you have a following on social media, then you live on social media. And the reality is, no. I post what I want to when I want to, but I don't share everything. And the same dynamic is in the same house that everyone else has. We have the same issues, same problems. Can't get the kids out the door in the morning. You know, they argue about dinner at the moment. Oh, it's so frustrating. Every time they come home from school, it's like, oh, we had that for lunch. We don't want to eat it again. And I was like, oh, for God's sake, seriously. Like, I need to get a menu from school so that I can actually validate what they're saying. And then I found myself, we're making like 4 different meals for 4 different kids. It's like, oh, this is not fun. So it's the same as everyone else. The difference is that I get joy from, creating video content as well, and like writing, where I think that's where I differentiate myself a little bit, is being able to kind of write some funny bits about the day or my experience. And because a lot of these things is, if you can't laugh, then you'll end up crying. And my solution with these things and with most things in life is to not take them too seriously and to smile and laugh at them if you can.
One of the things that happened to me, my story in terms of my oldest child was that she was born on the day after we got married.
Oh, wow.
So my wife went into labour on our wedding night. So I went from being a single man with no kids to being married with a child within the space of 24 hours. And
that's impressive.
I got hit quite dramatically with the case of postnatal depression.
Really?
When my eldest was born, I didn't get that big, massive, rush of love or anything like that. And the reason that we picked up on it is because when my wife was getting the postnatal questionnaire that you get, I was in the room at the same time, and when Lisa was answering no to the questions, in my head I was answering yes. So that's how we ended up getting it.
Wow.
How do you think it's important for dads to be checked up on in terms of their mental health, in terms of postnatal, as well as mums?
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is something that is becoming more prevalent and more people are becoming more aware of, is that side, is the paternal side of mental health. Because I think there is a major focus on the woman, the wife, the mother, to be able to make sure that they are okay. Their body has gone through a huge amount of stress. But I think some of the things that are that is overlooked sometimes is the stress that's then placed on the partner. And I think this is because a lot of the time men aren't very good about talking about their own stresses, their own strains. We're kind of looked upon to either bury those feelings or in some way we'll just kind of bury them, digest them, and then we'll just work through them. But the reality is, if you don't talk about the issues that you have, how are you ever going to offload them or share them? You can't deal with everything on your own. And I think although your wife or partner may be carrying the baby and their body going through the stresses, that doesn't stop you thinking about, what are the financial impacts on my family going to be? What impact does this have on my career? What impact is this going to have on my social life or the things that I enjoy doing? And I mentioned at the start, you do sacrifice some things when you become a parent. You can't just go out every weekend. You can't go out on the bike for 6-hour rides. All those different things. Those are going to fall away, and it is kind of like a bit of a mourning period for the life that you had. And recognizing that and being okay to talk about it is really important. If you can't talk about it with your partner, then finding a friend to be able to talk about it with, or just someone to have that release, or even writing it down to acknowledge that they are real feelings. Those are all things that we should all do a lot more of. And I think that's changing, because when I had my first daughter, it was never questions about, how I felt. But what I'm hearing more and more now is that midwives and medical professionals do ask, how are you both feeling? And there is at least an opportunity for you to offload. But I would encourage every man or partner out there to talk about those things honestly, because if you don't, then they can fester under the skin and actually kind of lead to some longer term issues as well.
Are you quite open with Clem about all your mental health and things like that?
I've been a lot better in the last couple of years, and I think this is weirdly through social media, because I know social media gets a very bad rap in terms of like mental health and creating stigmas and all that kind of stuff. But the way in which I've always used it is to talk into a camera, is to acknowledge the way I'm feeling. And I will talk quite openly in my stories about, challenges that are happening during the day, or bigger challenges as well. And I have talked about, having had friends who I've lost. I've talked about that my eldest daughter, my middle daughter, has recently got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And I talked openly about how that makes me feel and like what kind of position that puts me in. And that outlet, even just talking into a camera for a little bit, helps me kind of get that out there and out of my head. And I think that I'm also have those conversations with Clemmy on a regular basis around, how we're feeling, what the stress is, how do we support each other better? Because I think there is sometimes this kind of, I know it's a team, parenting is a team sport, but sometimes it does feel like one's pulling more weight than the other one, or, you're not sharing the workload, or you're getting really told off for not doing the dishwasher properly, or whatever it might be. It's all those little things that niggle around. So it's really important to keep that dialogue open and actually talk about that, even if it's just ranting for a little bit, because you need that person to be able to share that with.
Right, quickly, who is the one that's moaning about the dishwasher?
Oh, well, no, Clemmy's a cleanliness freak. Yeah, I'm and not exactly the cleanest person in the world. I'm less concerned about how spick and span everything is. I'm much more concerned about if people are happy. Whereas it's the other way around with Clemmie. She's like, she wants the clean house, and everyone else will do it. So yeah, between us, we make it work.
That's just when you mentioned the dishwasher there. I am always getting into trouble for how I excuse me, for how I load the dishwasher, because I always get it wrong. Don't put that on top of that, because then that won't wash that. That's what.
Yes, yeah. I think there's millions of the same conversation happening all over the country.
Oh no. Excuse me. When you became a dad, when the twins came along, you know, or when you found out about the twins coming along, how did that affect the other two?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, because I think the way in which the process has gone is our first daughter wasn't necessarily planned, but came into the world. The next one was planned, and then the twins were planned but not planned, because no one plans for twins, if you know what I mean. So it becomes an interesting dynamic, because obviously our eldest has gone from being an only child to having 3 younger siblings, and I think each time a sibling comes along, they get a little bit more annoyed that they are no longer the complete center of attention. And so it's been an interesting kind of journey. And initially they were very interested and excited that twins, it's novelty, isn't it? Yeah, that'll be good fun. But I think the realities of when the twins came into the world and them seeing just how much time it takes for parents to look after twins, I think the novelty wore off quite quickly. I think it was after a month or two, they were like, you don't spend any time with us anymore. Well, it's like, yeah, well, we're now sleeping in separate bedrooms. I've got a twin each. And that was what we did for the first 6 months. Like, we would take it in turns because they wouldn't sleep at the same time. So, yeah, I mean, it just became a balancing act. And you always feel like you're just on the edge of everything kind of falling apart. But somehow we managed to muddle through it. And now they've got to the age of 5. So I feel like we're a bit more stable. But, yeah, I've got friends who are having their first children and they're having twins. And I've always asked myself the question, if I had twins the first time round, would I have then had more kids? And I don't know is the answer. I'm sure I probably would, because I love being a parent, but it must be a real shell shock if it's the first time around.
I can imagine. We had a moment a few days ago when our middle child, Summer, she was off at her friend's house playing. So it was just the eldest and the youngest together, and the house was so calm.
Yeah.
When one of them isn't here, it's just the house is so calm, and you think, should we have stopped it too?
Yeah.
But then you go, well, no, because then we wouldn't have Erica. But
yeah, exactly.
It must be the same in your house as well.
Yeah. There's always those moments that you think, well, can I just like give one away, like for a bit or something? But then invariably they do something nice, or they are part of the family, and I think that is the core of families, right? You love each other to death, right? But that's the problem. You're so close to killing someone most of the time. But yeah, as you say, like it's very interesting to see the dynamics because there's quite an age gap between the twins and the eldest one. That is more like a babysitter relationship, which is quite interesting. So she'll be in charge and bossing them around. Whereas Marnie, who's 10, she's very much more of a kind of older sister. So she plays with them and, gets involved in their games. So it's interesting to see how the age gaps make an impact as well on that relationship. But hopefully they'll all be friends when they're older. I definitely am with my siblings, but we weren't always friends, that's for sure.
No, I know. When my eldest was, I think she was 3 or 4, and I'll tell you the reason why I'm bringing this story up. She came in to... This is before YouTube Kids existed, so it was just normal YouTube. She was sitting, I think she was playing on my phone or elsewhere. And she'd come into the living room and she'd said to my wife, she says, "Mummy, I'm the mother and queen." And we said to her, "Where did you hear that word?" And she says, "Well, Elsa said it." Okay, well, I can assure you that Elsa did not say that. And it turned out, leaving your kid alone with YouTube back then was maybe a bit dangerous. And she'd come across a battle rap between Elsa and Snow White, and that's how it ended. I'm the mother and queen.
Wow.
obviously, you know, with your 4 kids, there
Yeah.
must be some stories floating about in your head.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're endless stories. A lot of it revolves around the twins blaming each other for things. Because this is a bad thing to admit, but I still really struggle to tell them apart. I mean, they are identical.
I was about to ask.
They're identical twins, but and then we put different hairbands in them and all that kind of stuff. But they are constantly blaming the other one for things that have happened, or Mr. Nobody. I don't know, Mr. Nobody probably exists in your house as well, right? So things go missing or things get broken, and then no one has any responsibility for it whatsoever. So yeah, that's always fun to deal with. But I mean, a lot of the things that I'm seeing now is our elder girls teaching the younger ones bad habits. So like they'll say, oh, you know, mummy and daddy have got some change on the table. Can you just go and get those coins? So they'll send them off and like to go and steal from us, basically. And then I found a £20 note once under one of their pillows. I was like, where's that from? The Tooth Fairy? No, it's not. It's not from the Tooth Fairy. I know it's not from the Tooth Fairy. So it's like, right. So I'm obviously building a tribe of thieves in my house. But yeah, it's constantly fun. But the most annoying thing, and I don't know, maybe your kids went through this phase, was making slime. I'm so glad that time is over. Yeah. Or it seems to be over, but it'll be replaced by something else. But they were constantly making slime, and they do it without our permission as well. So the kitchen would just be covered with it, and then in the bathroom, they once made something with like Orbeez, like those little rubber balls, and
living our life.
Yeah, and they made it in the sink, but they put the Orbeez in without hydrating them with water. So they poured it down the sink, so it bunged up the whole of the pipe down the sink, then turned on the taps, and then just filled all the pipes upstairs with these Orbeez as they expanded. So like none of the taps, none of the showers, none of the baths worked on this floor in the house for like a week, and we had to get like a plumber out to take apart the pipes. And it just, as he did, you'd see all these multicolored Orbeez like falling out everywhere. It's like, and this is why we need to have better supervision of our children.
Yep, slime is banned in our house now.
Oh yeah,
it's 1,000,000%. And I've said that we sent messages to the grandparents and the aunts and uncles. You buy slime for those children; they are not they can play with it in your house.
Yeah, exactly. The one that really frustrated me is when they start adding things to it. So they were like putting glitter in it and things like that. I was like slime is bad enough, but then add glitter in, which is like the devil's STD. It gets bloody everywhere. It's ridiculous. Like it is like in the carpets, it's on the walls, it's in my hair. It's like, whoever invented glitter, I hope died a horrible death, because it is an awful thing.
Oh, that's I've never heard it described like that before.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I was going through your Instagram, obviously, just before we started here, and one of the things that I noticed was those reminders that you're a dad of girls. One of them being when you take your socks off and you realise that you've had, your makeover, and your toenails are painted. Now, luckily, my girls have never asked or offered to do that to me. So
but have you ever offered though? That's the question.
That's a very good point, and I can't say I have, but now I think I'm going to have to.
You're missing a trick.
Is there anything that, like being a dad, especially of girls, that you've learned about you since being around? Yeah,
it's a good question. And I don't know if it's because I have girls, because I don't have boys to compare to, right? So that's not I don't necessarily know about that. But I think I've got a lot more patience. So this is a general, comment about parenting. I've got a lot more patience than I ever thought I had. I think that's because I want my children to have like the best experience as they're growing up. I don't want them to have memories of just having to tidy the house all the time. I want them to have fond memories of childhood. So I give them a bit more leeway than I probably experienced myself, which is no bad thing. But I guess in terms of like girls specifically, I think one of the things I've learned is that girls, when boys have a fight at school, for example, or boys are mean to each other, it tends to be quick and over and done with relatively quickly. And then in like it happens in one break time, and by the next break time you're probably mates again and you're playing football. Like with girls can be emotionally mean to each other quite deeply, and it's more about what they say, or how they act around someone that can have a real impact. So one of the things that I've really tried to help my girls come to think about is what's the impact of what you're saying on someone's mental state. Like what could that actually mean? So that's one of the things that I've learned, is that girls can be quite manipulative. I'm not saying that boys that can't, but they, especially with me, they know how to manipulate me to get me to do stuff that they want me to do without me even knowing it. So that's one of the things that I've learned. But other than that, I can't say if there's specific things to just girls. I think generally, like kids today, they all seem to be growing up a lot quicker, as I mentioned. And that's the thing that scares me. I want them to have a bit more of a childhood and not wish it away. I don't know how much power I've got to stop that happening.
We had a moment a couple of weeks ago when Lisa and I were listening to 90s music. I think it was either in the car or in the house, I can't remember. And my eldest referred to that as old people music. So the thing is now though that the 90s stuff is making a revival. So this is your I guess when your child gets to teenage years, they might be looking at the 2000s and thinking, wow, that's like vintage retro. But like I find it really funny now. My eldest daughter is walking around in like Adidas shell toe shoes. She's like wearing Fila and Kappa tops and Champion. She's like got a vinyl record bag, even though she doesn't know what vinyl is, and like she's just really interested in anything that's 90s. I gave her an old CD player that I used to have in my bedroom that had like a tape deck in it as well. And I didn't want to tell her how to use it. I was just like, oh, here you go, you plug it in. And then I watched her for about 10-15 minutes trying to preset the radio channels. You remember when you used to have to, when you have to hold down the buttons and then like press preset, and then how do you like do the record as well? When you want to record something, you've got to hold things down. And it was really funny trying to watch her figure this technology out that was obviously completely alien to her. I mean, to me, it was just like, how do you not get this? But obviously, I don't think she's ever held a cassette in her life either. So, one of the things that I do, part of my background is working with children with their mental health. I travel. Well, I used to travel all over the country. I'd visit schools and I'd give mental health talks to children. Yeah. And one of the things that I found there that they're aware, and there's no judgment here, but there are a lot of parents that weren't as forthcoming about their mental health with the children, and didn't think that children should be exposed to that word, mental illness. Yeah. What's your thoughts?
So I think we're quite lucky in the fact that our children live in a time where they're probably a lot more aware about mental health than we ever were when we were growing up, right? Because if you think about what did mental health mean when I was a kid, it meant someone who was mad, insane. Like the idea of depression or anxiety or all the other things that can happen in between, that was never really discussed. It was more about like just madness. That was the only thing that ever came to mind when you talked about mental health. But over the last couple of years, it's become a normality to be able to talk about these things. And I think this is an acknowledgement of understanding, recognizing that you have a need for support or a need for discussion is actually a strength rather than a weakness. And children are a lot better at taking this stuff on and understanding than we give them credit for as well. I think there is this, with some people, there's this feeling that we should, protect them from that side of things. But how can they recognize their own sides of mental health issues if they can't understand it from a parent's perspective as well? And I have a relatively new example. I mentioned the type 1 diabetes diagnosis for Marnie, and that has been a really tough mental challenge for her. She's essentially mourning the loss of what was her normal life, and she's now reliant on insulin for the rest of her life, and she has to do glucose monitoring 6 or 7 times a day, and it has made a huge amount of difference. And there have been those times where she's been in bed at night crying, like, why me? But the thing is that she feels capable of talking about those things and sharing those. And I think that's because Clemmy and I have always been relatively open about talking about how we feel as well, and not bottling things up too much or hiding them. Because the last thing you want is a parent that's hiding the true way that they're feeling, because you can't pour from what's the saying? You can't pour from an empty cup, right? If you don't feel like you're fulfilled, or if you've got the energy, then how are you going to be able to help others around you? So yeah, that's I think it's really important that our children do actually understand not only our own mental health, but I think the concepts and the things around anxiety and depression, so they can recognize those signs themselves.
So just to wrap this up, and it's going to be a very vague question, so you can take it however you want, okay?
Yep.
I'm a member of dad forums and things like that all over Facebook and social media and stuff, and every dad has got their own one piece of advice that they would give to another. You know, what would you, if you were standing in a room full of dads and they say, right, Simon, give us one piece of advice, what would it be?
Okay, so this is probably one that's repeated and has been said many, many times before, but do not compare yourself to other parents, right? There is a really unhealthy tendency to feel like the person over there is doing it better than you. And just because they might be projecting that they are being better at being a parent, it's not a competition, and everyone is failing in some way, right? There is no such thing as being a perfect parent. So as soon as you start to recognize that and don't feel the need to compare yourself, then as long as you're doing the best you can do, then no one else can ask anything else. So that would be my one piece of advice.
Yeah. I mean, that's really deep. I mean, mine is always have a bauble on your wrist. That's all mine was.
Right. Well, if I'd known you go for that angle, now I feel like an absolute plum. Right.
I was joking. I actually think it's perfect, because that was one of the catalysts to my postnatal depression when my eldest was born. I was comparing myself to my own dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's how it ended up coming. Simon, thank you for taking the time out to chat to us today, and being the very first guest on this podcast. So thank you.
No problem at all. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much for having me on.